The auction block. The alien market was loud. Bright lights flashed from the stalls. Creatures of all shapes and sizes walked between rows of cages. Some were laughing, some were shouting, and in the middle of the crowd stood a platform made of cold metal. That platform was for selling living beings. Nara stood on that platform. Her feet were bare, her clothes were torn, her hands were locked in metal cuffs. A chain connected her neck to a tall iron post behind her. A loud voice shouted, "Next, Lot 847, personal use only." The crowd turned. Some aliens whistled, others laughed. Some came closer and poked her with sticks. Nara didn't speak. She didn't move. Her eyes stared at the ground, empty, like she was not really there. She had been sold many times before. She knew how this worked. They would bid, someone would pay, and she would belong to them. "Look at her body," one alien shouted. "She's small but strong," another said. "Does she bite?" a fat buyer joked. Nara didn't answer. Her back still hurt from the last time she spoke without permission. The bidding started. 10 credits, 15, 25. The auctioneer smiled. "Very good. Lot 847 is rare. Only one like her in this region." Nara closed her eyes. She didn't care who bought her, rich or poor, gentle or cruel, it was all the same. But then, something strange happened. A new voice spoke. Calm, deep, human. 50 credits. The crowd turned to see him. He was not rich, not dressed like the others. He wore a dusty coat, boots with holes, and a small bag over his shoulder. A simple human man. He didn't look like a buyer. The auctioneer laughed. 50? You? Do you even have 50? The man stepped forward. "It's all I have." He opened his bag and poured coins into the auctioneer's hand. Every last one. No food money, no travel money, nothing left. "Sold," the auctioneer said, shocked. People in the crowd whispered. "He's crazy." "Why her?" He wasted his coins. Nara opened her eyes slowly. She looked at the human. He was watching her, but not like the others. He wasn't looking at her body. He was looking at her face, her eyes, like she was someone. The auctioneer unlocked her chains. The metal dropped to the floor with a loud clang. Nara stumbled. Her legs were weak. She was used to crawling. The human didn't grab her. He didn't pull her like the others had done. He just said, "Come, let's go." She didn't move. "Are you going to punish me?" she asked quietly. He frowned. "No." "Then what do you want from me?" Her voice trembled. He paused, then said, "Nothing. Just walk beside me." She followed, confused. Why wasn't he angry? Why wasn't he proud? Why wasn't he cruel? They walked past the stalls, past aliens laughing and pointing. One even offered the human double what he paid. He refused. Outside the market, night had fallen. The stars were bright, cold, wind blew. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her. She looked up at him. Why are you doing this?" He smiled a little. "Because no one else did." She hugged the coat tighter. He led her to a small shelter, a quiet place behind some old cargo containers. Inside there was a fire and a bedroll. He offered her food, soft bread and soup. She stared at it, then at him. "Eat," he said. "You need it more than I do." Her hands shook as she reached out. She hadn't had warm food in weeks. She ate slowly, not believing this was real. He sat across from her, arms resting on his knees. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "I don't have one," she said. He thought for a moment. "Then let me give you one. How about Nara?" She repeated it. "Na-ra." He nodded. "It suits you." Tears came to her eyes. She didn't know why. She wasn't used to kindness. She wasn't used to anyone caring. That night, Nara lay near the fire. Not chained, not cold, not alone. She watched the human as he fell asleep sitting up. She whispered softly, "Why me?" But he was already asleep. And for the first time in her life, she closed her eyes, feeling a little safe. The morning light crept in through the cracks of the old metal shelter. Nara woke slowly, confused for a moment. She was warm. She was not chained. And she was not being kicked awake. The soft coat that the human had given her was still wrapped around her like a shield. Her body tensed as she turned her head toward the fire, but then relaxed when she saw him. The human man was already awake. He sat by the fire, stirring something in a small pot. His eyes glanced toward her, but he said nothing. There was no order, no harsh command, just quiet. Nara sat up slowly, unsure of what to do. She looked at her bare feet, at her wrists that no longer wore metal. She still felt them, those heavy cuffs, but they were gone now. The chains had fallen. Yet part of her didn't believe it. He offered her a bowl. She hesitated. Was this food for her, or would he punish her for touching it? But his eyes were calm, kind. After a long pause, she reached out and took it. The soup was simple, but to Nara, it tasted like something from another world, because it came without fear. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "Somewhere safer," he said. "Out of the market zone, maybe a small town past the ridge. Will you sell me again?" Her voice was barely a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out, a small round tag, the kind they used to label slaves. Her old tag. It read, "Lot 847, personal use." He handed it to her. She stared at it, confused. "You're not that anymore," he said. "You can burn this. Throw it away. It's your choice." Her hands trembled as she held the tag. The number had been her only identity for years. Now he was telling her it meant nothing, that she could choose who she was. "But I don't know who I am," she said honestly. He looked at her gently. "You're Nara. That's a start." They walked through the morning mist, heading away from the slave markets and the sound of traders. Nara walked slowly at first, watching for signs of a trap. But none came. The human didn't walk ahead, of her or behind her. He walked beside her. As they passed a group of travelers, a merchant stopped and eyed her. "She yours?" The merchant asked with a grin. The human answered firmly, "No one owns her." The merchant laughed. "Come on, I'll give you triple what you paid." The human's face changed. Calm turned to steel. "She's not for sale. Not now, not ever." The merchant blinked, then moved on. Nara looked at him, heart racing. No one had ever spoken like that about her. She didn't understand. "Why?" she asked once the merchant was gone. "Why did you say that?" He didn't stop walking. "Because you're not a thing. You're a person, and no one has the right to own a person." She said nothing, but inside her something cracked. Not in pain, but in confusion. Her whole life she had been told she was less than others. A tool. A toy. Now this strange man was saying she was worthy? They reached a small clearing and rested by a stream. The human washed his face. Nara sat nearby, hugging her knees. She watched him carefully. He had no armor, no weapon, only a bag with basic supplies. He had truly given up everything to free her. "What's your name?" she finally asked. He looked up, surprised. "Jonas," he said. "Jonas Reed." She nodded. "Jonas," she repeated softly. As they rested, he began making something with stones and sticks. Nara was curious, so she moved closer. He was building a small trap, simple, harmless. "To catch dinner," he said. Nara watched, then reached out to help. She had quick fingers. She tied knots better than he did. Jonas laughed. "Looks like you're better at this than I am." She didn't smile, but she looked proud. Just a little. When the trap was done, she sat by the fire again, watching him. He didn't touch her. He didn't give her strange looks. He simply talked. About stars, about his old job fixing machines, about nothing important. And slowly she began to listen. That night, as darkness returned and the fire crackled, Nara lay on the bedroll. Her body wanted to sleep, but her mind raced. "Why me?" she asked softly. Jonas looked up from his spot across the fire. "There were so many others," she continued. "Why did you spend your last coin on me?" He thought for a moment, then said, "Because you looked like someone who needed someone." Tears touched her eyes, but she turned away so he wouldn't see. She wrapped the coat tighter around herself and whispered, "Thank you." Jonas said nothing. But in that silence, she felt safer than she had in years. And that night, when she closed her eyes, the chains didn't follow her into her dreams. The sun rose slowly behind the rocky hills as Nara and Jonas continued walking. The morning was quiet, except for the sound of boots on dry dirt and the chirps of tiny winged creatures above. Nara walked with her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She still wasn't used to walking freely without chains, without someone shouting at her to move faster. But Jonas never rushed her. He let her move at her own pace as if her comfort actually mattered. They reached a small village made of old metal huts and reused starship parts. It was quiet but busy. Traders unloading supplies, machines humming, children chasing each other through the dust. Jonas walked straight to the market, nodding politely to people. Nara kept her head down, her hood pulled low. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had been in places like this before, and they never ended well. Jonas stopped at a food stall, trading, a small metal part for dried fruit and water. He handed Nara the fruit first. She hesitated, then took it. Her fingers were still thin. Her eyes still held shadows. But when she ate now, she no longer flinched. A voice from behind startled her. "Hey, human, is that what I think it is?" Nara turned sharply. A tall alien merchant in shiny blue robes stared at her. His eyes were wide with interest, like he had found a lost treasure. He walked closer, grinning. "That's a Class Effie. Female, isn't it? Personal use slave. Haven't seen one in a long time." Jonas stepped between them. "She's not for sale." The merchant laughed. "Everything is for sale. I'll give you 500 credits. That's 10 times what you probably paid." Jonas didn't move. "She's not an item. She's a person." "Come on," the merchant pushed. "You're a smart man. Don't be foolish. Look at her. She's trained. She doesn't even talk back. That's rare." Nara's hand started to shake. Her breathing became fast. The voices, the hunger, the darkness. Memories rushed back. She tried to step away, but her legs froze. Then Jonas's voice cut through the noise, firm, loud. "Back off. I won't say it again." The merchant blinked. He looked around. People were starting to watch, muttering. Jonas stared into his eyes. "She's not for sale, not now, not ever." After a moment of silence, the merchant scoffed and walked away, muttering, "Foolish human." Jonas turned to Nara. She hadn't moved. Her eyes were wide. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. He gently touched her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded slowly, then whispered, "No one's ever said that before. Not even once." Jonas smiled. "Well, I just said it loud enough for the whole town." They found a small place to rest near the edge of the village. Jonas used some old metal pieces to make a wind block while Nara sat on a blanket, her eyes staring at the sky. That night she didn't eat in silence. She asked him questions. What planet was he from? Did he have family? Why did he leave Earth? He answered them all, smiling when she laughed at his story about accidentally setting a robot's head on fire during a repair job. Later, as the stars filled the sky, she looked at him differently. Not like a buyer, not like a master, but like someone real. someone who saw her not as property, but as something precious. She picked up the slave tag from her old clothes. She had kept it until now. "Maybe I should burn it," she said. Jonas nodded. "If you're ready." She stared at it for a while, then placed it gently in the fire. The metal glowed red, then orange, and finally turned black. She didn't cry, but something inside her felt lighter. Later that night, a strong wind shook their shelter. Nara woke with a gasp. She sat up, breathing hard. Her dreams were still filled with chains, with dark hands and cruel voices. Jonas sat nearby, half asleep. He noticed her shaking. "You okay?" She hesitated, then crawled across the blanket and lay beside him. Not touching him, just close enough to feel safe. He didn't ask questions. He just lay back down, giving her space. She whispered, "Thank you for saying I'm not for sale." He didn't answer with words, just gave a small nod and closed his eyes again. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her without wanting anything in return. She wasn't property anymore. She was becoming Nara. The wind blew softly through the open plains the next morning, but Nara didn't feel the cold. She sat near the fire, silent, watching Jonas prepare their morning meal. The way he moved was gentle but strong, like he had done this 100 times before. He didn't rush. He didn't shout, and for some reason that calm made her chest feel tight in a strange way. She looked down at her hands. They were still rough, the skin worn from years of hard labor. But they were healing. The old blisters were gone, and her fingers didn't shake when she reached for things. That alone felt strange. Jonas handed her a small cup of tea, warm and simple. She took it with a quiet, "Thank you." He nodded, as always, not expecting anything more. He never demanded anything from her, not even words. After breakfast, she helped him pack. She had learned to fold the blanket just the way he liked it. He smiled when she did that. It was a small thing, but it made her feel useful in a good way, not like before. Before, she was only used for pleasure or pain. Now she was part of something. As they walked again through a quiet path, Nara noticed the way Jonas glanced around, always alert, always protective. She realized he had been doing that since the beginning, checking for danger, making sure she was safe. No one had ever done that for her. Ever. They found a small creek around midday. Jonas dropped his bag, washed his hands, and drank. Nara sat by a rock, her eyes on the water. It shimmered under the sun, clean and clear. She touched the surface, feeling the cold run through her fingers. "You've been quiet," Jonas said, sitting near her. She nodded. "I'm just thinking." He didn't push her to speak, didn't fill the silence with useless words. Finally, she whispered, "I want to show you something." Jonas looked at her gently. "Okay." She slowly pulled back her sleeve, revealing a long scar that ran from her elbow to her wrist. Then she lifted the hem of her tunic, turning slightly, showing the burns and cuts on her back. Some fresh, most old. Her breathing got faster. Her hands clenched. Her eyes refused to meet his. "I was punished for speaking, for crying, for saying no." Jonas didn't speak. He didn't gasp. He didn't look away. He just reached into his bag and pulled out a small metal container. Without a word, he opened it and gently placed some ointment on his fingers. "May I?" he asked softly. She nodded, barely. His hands were warm. Careful. He didn't press hard or act like she was broken. He treated her skin with respect, like it wasn't something ugly, like her scars weren't something to be ashamed of. Nara closed her eyes. For a moment, she forgot the pain. She forgot the chains, the dark rooms, the cold floors. All she felt was the sun on her face and the kind hands on her back. When he was done, she whispered, "Why do you care?" He answered without thinking, "Because someone should have, a long time ago." She wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the tears, but he didn't laugh at her. He just smiled, like he understood. That night, the stars shone brighter than usual. They made camp near a tree with glowing leaves, and the fire cast dancing lights across their faces. Nara sat closer to Jonas than she had before. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. She wasn't even unsure. She felt something she never expected, to feel again. Safe. "I used to sing," she said quietly, breaking the silence. Before everything. I don't remember all the songs, but I remember the feeling." Jonas looked at her, surprised. "Will you sing now?" She hesitated, then smiled shyly. "Maybe someday." He nodded. "I'll wait." She leaned back on the blanket, looking up at the stars. "You never ask for anything," she said after a while. "I don't want anything," he replied. "Not even me?" she asked, her voice shaky. Jonas looked at her carefully. "Only if you ever want to give yourself freely, not as payment, not because you feel like you owe me, only because you want to." Nara was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You're not like anyone I've ever met." He chuckled. "That's probably true." That night, Nara didn't sleep on the far edge of the blanket. She rolled closer, close enough to feel his warmth. She didn't ask for permission. She just laid her head on his shoulder. Jonas didn't move. And in the soft silence of the stars above, she whispered, "Maybe I'll sing tomorrow." They left early, just as the sky turned soft with morning light. Nara walked beside Jonas, feeling stronger, more sure of her steps. Her body still carried scars, but her spirit didn't feel as heavy anymore. The road ahead was rough, but it was better than the cage behind her. They planned to cross into the southern edge of a trading post, one where humans and aliens lived side by side. Jonas hoped to find work as a repairman. He said he was good with engines, and Nara believed him. She had seen the tools in his bag, always clean and well kept, like his hands when they worked. As they reached a cliffside trail, Jonas stopped suddenly. His eyes narrowed. Nara followed his gaze. In the distance, coming fast, was a dust crawler, a long, armored vehicle used by bounty hunters. Her heart sank. Jonas pulled her gently behind a boulder. They crouched down, hidden. The crawler came, to a stop. Heavy boots hit the ground. 4 aliens stepped out, each tall, armored, and carrying stun rods. One of them shouted, "We have a warrant for a stolen Class F slave. She was sold below legal trade routes. We're here to return her to her original owner." Nara's breath caught. Her knees weakened. "It's him. He's found me," she whispered. "He wants me back." Jonas looked at her, calm but serious. "He won't get you." "But they have weapons, they have the law. I don't care. You're not going with them." Nara grabbed his sleeve. "You'll die if you fight them." "Then I die doing something right," he said. He stepped out from behind the boulder before she could stop him. The bounty hunters turned at once, readying their weapons. Jonas raised both hands. "She's not a slave anymore. I paid the price. She's free now." The leader barked. "It wasn't a legal sale. Her owner never signed off. She's still property." "She's not property. She's a person. You're not taking her." They began to spread out, closing in. Nara stood up behind him. "Jonas, please." He turned slightly. "Run if you need to. I'll buy you time." But she didn't run. Instead, she stepped beside him. "I'm not leaving you," she said. "Not again." The bounty leader scoffed. "You think love changes law?" Jonas said, "I think law without love is just cruelty." Suddenly, a loud growl echoed from the rocks above. Everyone looked up. From the high cliff, a large alien creature appeared, a 4-legged beast with thick black fur and glowing red eyes. It was a mountain guardian, known to protect those it considered its own. It growled again, louder this time, shaking the stones. The bounty hunter stepped back. Nara stared in shock. "That's a Kurnox." Jonas didn't move. The beast locked eyes with him, then slowly climbed down, placing itself between the humans and the hunters. It didn't attack. It simply stood there, guarding. The bounty leader snarled, "This isn't over." They retreated to their crawler and drove away, dust filling the air behind them. Nara and Jonas stood still as the beast turned its head. It sniffed the air around Jonas, then gave a deep grunt before returning to the cliffs. Nara blinked. Why didn't it attack you?" Jonas shrugged. "Maybe even wild things know the difference between a monster and a man." They continued on, the silence between them heavy with what had just happened. Nara held tightly to his arm. Her fingers wouldn't stop shaking. That night they stopped in a quiet valley, under a rock shelf to keep the wind away. Jonas had a small cut on his arm from when he tripped during the escape. Nara washed it carefully, wrapping the cloth with steady hands. "You could have been killed," she whispered. "But I wasn't," he replied softly. "You were ready to die for me." He looked at her. "Because you're worth protecting." Nara didn't speak. She just stared at him for a long moment, then leaned in and rested her forehead against his. "I'm not used to being worth anything," she said. "You will be," he promised. Later, as they lay on the same blanket under the dark sky filled with stars, Nara whispered, "If they come again, I won't run. I'll fight beside you." Jonas smiled in the dark. "I wouldn't want anyone else watching my back." They said nothing else. But when sleep came, they were side by side. Not slave and master, not buyer and product, but two people. One scarred by the past, the other ready to fight for her future. The next morning the sky was gray. A soft fog rolled through the trees as Nara and Jonas packed their few belongings. Neither of them spoke much, but their silence wasn't heavy, it was full of understanding. Nara didn't walk behind Jonas anymore. She walked beside him, her head held higher than before. Something inside her had changed. She was still healing, still unsure, but she wasn't afraid of herself anymore. They reached the outer walls of the southern trading post by noon. It was busier than any place they had seen so far. Alien guards stood at the gates, watching everyone who entered. Metal scanners beeped and voices echoed through speakers overhead. Jonas took Nara's hand gently as they stepped inside. People stared, a few whispered. A few recognized the shape of Nara's ears, her skin tone, the markings on her neck, the signs of her old caste. Some laughed cruelly, others just looked away. But Jonas never let go of her hand. They found an old workshop near the edge of the market district. Jonas spoke with the owner, a short alien with mechanical limbs and grease on his clothes. After a quick test fixing a broken drone, Jonas was offered a place to work and a small room above the shop to live in. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That night, Nara stood by the window in the small room, staring out at the lights of the city. She watched the crowds move below like rivers of noise and color. She didn't feel part of them, but she didn't feel invisible anymore either. Jonas came in quietly, wiping his hands with a rag. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "Just thinking." "About what?" She hesitated. "About choices." He sat beside her. "What kind of choices?" She looked at him. "All my life I've only been moved, commanded, owned. I never chose anything, but now I do. You gave me that, and I don't know how to handle it." He smiled. "You don't have to know yet. You just have to be free to learn." Before she could answer, heavy boots echoed up the stairwell. Loud banging struck the door. Jonas stood fast, stepping in front of Nara. "Stay behind me." The door burst open. 3 armored officials entered. 2 aliens in uniform and a tall human with cold eyes and a datapad in hand. "Nara of Caste 847, the human officer said flatly. "You are not registered as a legal citizen or as a freed individual. By galactic law, you are to be taken into custody until ownership status is confirmed." Jonas stepped forward. "She's free. I paid for her. I've protected her. She's not a thing." The officer looked at Jonas. "That purchase was not through official channels. Without the original owner's signature or proper release form, she is still considered registered property. I don't care about your paperwork, Jonas said sharply. She's not going back. The officer raised a hand. If you interfere, you will be arrested. Jonas looked back at Nara. She was trembling, her face pale, but her eyes were clear, stronger than he had ever seen them. Then, without a word, she stepped forward. I will speak for myself, she said firmly. The officers blinked. Even Jonas was surprised. I am not property, she continued. I was sold, hurt, chained, but I was also saved, protected, named. I will not go back to being a number. The officer sighed. Do you have proof of freedom? Nara took a deep breath, then pulled a small object from her pouch. Jonas's old coat had a hidden pocket where she had kept the burned metal slave tag. She showed it to them. Melted, twisted, destroyed. This gauze was my past. You want to decide my future? Fine, then arrest me. But I will never again belong to anyone. The room went silent. Then slowly someone clapped. It came from the stairwell. More people had gathered. Neighbors, shop workers, even the mechanic Jonas worked for. They had heard the noise. Some of them had heard the story already. How Jonas had spent everything to free a girl with no name. How she had stayed beside him, loyal and quiet. Now they were seeing something more. A choice. The officer shifted uncomfortably. If enough witnesses stand for her, he muttered. She may be granted independent status, temporary. I stand for her, said the mechanic. So do I, said a trader from the shop below. One by one, hands rose. The officer frowned but nodded. Very well. Case will be reviewed. For now, she stays. The team left. Silence returned. Nara turned to Jonas. She was shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from something deeper. Relief, power, hope. Jonas stepped forward. You didn't have to speak. I did, she said. Because I wanted to. He looked at her for a long moment. Then I guess the choice is yours now, Nara. She smiled softly. Yes, she whispered. And I choose to stay with you. A week had passed since Nara stood up to the officers. The dust had settled, but the memory of that moment still lived in every corner of the little workshop town. Whispers followed her wherever she walked. The slave who spoke for herself. The girl who chose to be free. The one the human saved and refused to sell. But Nara didn't hide from the attention. She walked with her head high, her steps firm, and her eyes open to the sky. Jonas kept busy fixing old engines and repairing drones. He worked hard, often until his hands were stained with oil and grease. But every evening, when the sun dipped low and painted the sky in red and gold, he returned to Nara. Sometimes she would wait by the river. Sometimes she'd be repairing a torn blanket or helping the local kids read. Wherever she was, she always greeted him with that soft smile, the one that still caught him off guard. They didn't talk much about love. They didn't need to. It was in the way she poured his tea. It was in the way he made sure she never had to sleep near the door again. It was quiet, steady, and strong. One day, as the wind swept dust across the stone road, Jonas walked into the room carrying a small box made of wood. Nara looked up from folding clothes, curious. What's that? She asked. He sat down and placed it in front of her. Something I made. Inside was a ring, not gold, not fancy. It was made of woven wire and polished stone, a piece from the same engine she helped him fix on their second day in the village. I know it's not much, he said, but I was thinking, maybe we don't need much. She stared at it, eyes wide. Her voice was quiet. Are you asking me? Jonas nodded slowly. Not as someone who saved you, not because you owe me anything, but because I want to build a life with you, not out of pity, not out of guilt. Just because I care. Nara blinked back sudden tears. Then she picked up the ring gently, cradling it in her fingers. I don't care what it's made of, she whispered. It's the first thing anyone ever made for me. She slipped it onto her finger, and her hand didn't shake. "Yes," she said simply. Word spread fast, as things always did in small towns. And though neither of them planned anything big, the people around them began to gather. A neighbor offered cloth for a dress. The old mechanic brought spare metal pieces to decorate the courtyard. A baker gave them bread, and a group of children made wildflower crowns from weeds and vines. On the day of the wedding, the air was dry, the sky open, and the ground soft with wind-blown dust. Nara stood near a small fire pit, her dress plain but clean, her hair braided with thin silver wire and leaves. Jonas waited beside her, looking nervous in a shirt that didn't quite fit, but was clearly the best he had. There was no priest, no paper, no law official. Just the wind, the earth, and the people who stood beside them. Jonas held out his hands. "I have no fortune, no title, but I have a home I'm building, and I want to share it with you." Nara took his hands in hers. "I have no family name, no dowry, but I have a heart that is finally mine, and I give it to you." They stood in silence for a moment, letting their words hang in the air like soft music. Then someone from the crowd shouted, "Kiss her, fool!" Jonas smiled. Nara laughed, and he kissed her. It was gentle, slow, honest, and with that, they were married. Not by law, not by tradition, but by choice. Afterward, they sat with everyone and shared bread and soup. There was no wine, no feast, but there was laughter. Nara even sang, a quiet song from her childhood, half forgotten and broken, but beautiful. People stopped eating to listen. Jonas watched her with awe. Not because she was stunning, though. She was. Not because she belonged to him, because she didn't. But because she had become whole, free, herself. That night, they returned to their small room above the shop. There was no grand door, no soft bed, just 2 blankets and a firelight glow. As Nara laid beside him, her head on his chest, she whispered, "I used to dream of being rescued, but I never imagined what came after." He kissed the top of her head. What comes after is the best part, and for the first time Nara didn't dream of cages or pain or running. She dreamed of quiet mornings, shared meals, and a future that belonged to them. She had been a number once, but now she was a name, a wife, and free forever.